Welcome, 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 everyone, to a very special edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional who just happens to have a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight's special show will consist of an interactive history lesson conducted by a previous guest who you will recognize, who displayed some of her history teaching talents on a previous show. And I decided that one of the critical things missing in the narrative of the rolling back of our civil rights is that we do not really know how we got them in the first place. We don't talk about it enough. It certainly isn't taught on a regular basis in the classrooms. And what you don't know impacts you later if what is happening to us now. For instance, how long did it take for us to actually get our rights? And what were the major hurdles that we had to overcome to finally have a Voting Rights Act, a ruling against segregation in schools with Brown versus the Board of Education, etc.? You see, Black Americans do not talk about nor teach about our own Holocaust. It is not a part of our culture. I believe that's why we're in shock and awe now when the tides have turned against us. Nareissa Smith, our guest speaker today, is a lawyer, speaker, teacher, and journalist. For over a decade, Nareissa worked as a law professor teaching criminal law, the U.S. constitutional law, and classes such as critical race theory. As a result, Nareissa understands the many ways the American legal system perpetuates racism, sexism, and all other forms of inequality. She also possesses a deep knowledge of African American history and is a much sought after speaker on the subject. Nareissa is a summa cum laude graduate of Spelman College and a magna cum laude graduate of Howard University School of Law. And it is my pleasure to welcome Nareissa back to the show. Welcome back.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy. We've got a few comments in the thing here. Donald, it's official, vote Donald Anthony, County Commissioner in Oklahoma. Okay, Donald, good to have you. We'll have to talk about that. I'll have to have some of you guys for local elections on the show.
Absolutely.
All right. And Loretta Thomas Walker, my sorority sister, also always so faithful. Good evening. All right. Thank you so much. So, Nareissa, what do you have for us tonight?
Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to participate in this. And thank you for that overly kind introduction. And I want to say that our history is part of our power because one of the best things that I've ever heard is that history may not repeat, but it rhymes. And so hopefully that is part of what we can talk about tonight.
All right. All right. So I am going to put up your presentation on the screen. And guys, I've got the studio set up so that I can still see any comments or whatever that you may have or questions, because we do want to make it interactive, but because this is so important, because we need to share this information. I really want you all to share this video, like the video. And if you are on YouTube watching, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, Nareissa, I'm putting it on the stage.
All right. Why are we starting here? This is a presentation about voting rights. Well, I think it's obvious that we have to start, and there are other reasons why you'll see later. We have to start with the fact that when this country was founded, as we prepared to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, we were not a part of that. We had no rights, and we had no rights because we were enslaved. And so what you see here is just several different flyers for sale. That's how they used to do it. It was like the old school edition of eBay, and it's very vile to see how we were treated just like any other piece of property. But of course, meaning we had no voting rights. However, of course, that didn't stay the same way forever. We have the Civil War, of course, and everyone knows that the Civil War was the Union versus the Confederacy, right? So, or more simply, the North versus the South. And the Southern states were the ones that preferred slavery. So they, of course, wanted to hold on to slavery. So it was a long fight about what should happen, and a literal fight with the North winning. I wanted to pause for a moment, though, and we're going to come back to this. So you can see the map of the United States in 1861, 1865 during the Civil War. The blue states are the free states, the Union states. The red states are the Confederacy. And the purple states, we don't talk about this a lot, are the states on the border, meaning the states that were part of the Union, but they still allowed slavery. So there you have that. And that map is going to come up again. Trust me. So any questions so far? Any questions?
I don't see any in the chat, but I do have a comment.
Sure.
One of the things that we got to say, why was the slavery so important to those folks in the South? We just need real basic with it for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. Slavery was the engine of economic development in the South. It created America's first, well, they didn't have billionaires then, but if we converted the money to now, it would be billions. So cotton, all of those tobacco, all of the agricultural products that the country needed came from the South. However, we talk about the South a lot, but I got to say this. Who took that cotton and turned it into thread and turned it into fabric? That wasn't just a Southern operation. Who took that tobacco and turned it into cigarettes and all of that? A lot of people in the North and the South benefited economically from slavery. So I think it's crucial that we also talk about that. So yes, good point. So here's a question for the chat. This is the first question. So we talked about slavery. So when did Black people get the right to vote? I'm going to watch the chat because I want to see if anybody gets this. Let's see.
Okay. Anybody in the chat? I'm going to cheat and look it up.
No cheating. No Googling.
Y'all, we can't see whether you Google or not. So anybody have the answer to the question of when did Black people get the right to vote? We can give a hint. When was the Civil War over officially?
That's partially a hint, but also the way the question is worded is a little tricky on purpose.
Okay. Well, no one has said anything. I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody giving an answer. I don't see Loretta, Art, or Cheryl Deloach. And there may be other people in here putting out an answer. So
the answer is Black people. It's a much longer time. And I think that we can still say it was a much longer time, but in theory, and y'all will see why I'm saying in theory, Cheryl says 1965. I actually think that's a more correct answer than what I'm about to say. But in theory, Black men, that's the other reason, Black people, no women of any race got the right to vote until the 19th Amendment was passed. But in theory, Black men got the right to vote in 1870 when the 15th Amendment was passed. And the 15th Amendment says the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. And you can tell by the language that this was definitely intended to give formerly enslaved men the right to vote. In fact, if you know anything about the feminist movement and the suffragettes, one of the big schisms in the suffragette movement was what Black men are going to get the right to vote before we are. And some of the white women, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, were like, hey, the more people who get the right to vote, the stronger our argument becomes. Others, like Susan B. Anthony, were very perturbed by the fact that African-American man would get the right to vote before them.
Oh.
So this was a hot button issue. The suffragette movement ended up literally splitting and turning into two separate organizations over that issue, which is ironic because one of their biggest supporters was Frederick Douglass. So there's a lot that goes into history.
There's a lot of layers. Ms. Butler, you were saying, are you speaking of all of us? No, she was speaking, she said the word people, and it was really, she was talking about Black men, you might not have heard it, got the right to vote during the 15th Amendment, and that was 1870?
Yes.
In 1870. Okay. Carry on.
Yes. So once freedom comes, and then the 14th Amendment, and then the 15th Amendment, something amazing happens, which is that African American men, rather, do begin to vote. Here's the artist's drawing of it. Cameras weren't invented, but they were pretty expensive. So this is an artist's rendering that I think is from Vanity Fair. This one is a little bit older, but yeah. So it's like reporting on the fact that African Americans were voting, because this was big news. But then African Americans in Congress, in the 41st and 42nd Congress, look at this. Who would have thought that literally in the aftermath, these people a lot of them were formerly enslaved. One of the men in this picture, Robert Smalls, actually stole a Confederate warship and sailed his way to freedom. That's the story for another time.
Oh my goodness. Who is he? Can you identify him in this picture?
I believe that this is him. This is Hiram Revels, the first African-American senator.
Okay, it's not, your pointer isn't going, so tell me my point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I do believe he is the gentleman at the very far right. I do believe.
Him?
Let me see. Yeah, I think. I don't know if your pointer is working either, but that's okay.
It's working.
Okay. So, but you see, there were African-American men who immediately, the first thing that we did once we got the right to vote was put people who looked like us into office. Take a look at this picture. This is a picture of South Carolina's first legislature after the Civil War. Take a look at the folks in that picture and tell me what you notice. Oh, I'm sorry. That was my fault.
Okay.
My hand slipped. Take a look.
I see a whole lot of Black people.
Yeah. This legislature was majority, if not majority Black, close to it. However, this became a big sticking point.
Yeah.
How many of you are familiar with that old, horrible, racist movie, Birth of a Nation?
Yeah.
Well, in that movie, which I didn't want to tempt the gods of tech, so I just said I'm going to let that go. But if I were to play that clip, there is a scene in that horrible racist movie where you have African-American male legislators and they're taking their shoes off on the floor of the legislature, and they're eating watermelon and clicking on the floor, and they're fighting and all of this stuff. And yes, and this was Hollywood's first blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
That came out. So the point is that seeing pictures like this, and yes, and drunk as well. Yes, good point. This is Hollywood's and the reaction to seeing Black men in positions of power. It wasn't, oh, well, are they making good policy? It wasn't, oh, are they, being good at their jobs? No, it was, we have to get them out of here at any cost. We will not have that. We shall not let this happen. So, sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. So what happened? This is what I want to ask and see before I get to talking about what happened. I want to see if anyone knows any of the things that happened. If we had African Americans in Congress at a pretty good representation for the number of states that we had then, if we had African Americans in state legislatures, what happened?
They got upset that we were utilizing this new power that we had, that our Black men went and voted, and yes, they voted for themselves to get in office, and they were pissed off.
That is true. I want to add, Jim Crow happened. I like that answer. I'm looking for more. I feel like Alex Trebek. I'm looking for more specific answers. What sort, does anybody know some of the sorts of things that happened to try to keep us from voting?
Well, you had they had all these silly little games, not games, rules about, if you can't guess how many jelly beans are in a jar, then you can't get your access to vote. If you can't, there were poll taxes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There we go.
Literacy tests.
Exactly.
What have you.
So here's some of the things that were used, right? Because they came up first, I'm going to talk about them first. Poll taxes. Yes. One of the things that we also don't talk about is that after slavery, African Americans, this new group of folks, suddenly free, but with no job skills. There were laws against teaching us how to read and other things. So how are you going to make money? Well, most of them became sharecroppers. So farming the same or similar land for the same person. But it was a very shady system. People could never get ahead. There was always some fee or some tax, so that they were never, ever able to break even or even get ahead economically, because they were always in debt. And they didn't even pay them in cash. If you remember that scene in the movie Sinners, where they opened the juke joint and some of the people pay with these odd looking things that clearly aren't money, that was basically plantation money or sharecropping money. That's how they would pay them. And it was only good at like the plantation store. So to have people, to have a requirement where people had to pay money to vote, that was just, it was
impossible.
Exactly. Very few Black folks could afford to pay those. And literacy tests. The literacy tests were ridiculous. I've actually looked at some of them, and to say that they are literally like questions like how many jelly beans are in the jar is one, but also how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, something of that nature, or requiring you to copy out the whole Mississippi State Constitution by hand and not miss a space, a period, or a comma in any part of it. Just ridiculous. And of course, even though a lot of the white folks in this time also were illiterate, do you think that they were administering the literacy test to them?
No.
Of course not. Of course not. Now, grandfather clauses is one that is so sinister, because these laws said, well, if you can vote as long as you can prove that your grandfather was registered to vote. Now, of course, if this was 1872, 1875, how many Black folks could say that their grandfather was able to vote? So this is just, you see the sort of things that they came up with. They were like, okay, we got to get them like this. One that I want to talk about that a lot of folks don't talk about, or know about rather, is the white-only primaries. they would say, okay, maybe we'll let you guys vote, but you can only vote in the general election, but only white folks can vote in the primary. And if you know anything about elections, you know that the primaries are really important because that's where people decide who the candidates are going to be. So basically, they would let the white people decide who the candidates would be. And of course, they weren't going to vote for anybody black. So even if they did allow black people to vote in a particular county, there wasn't going to be any black representation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the
Exactly. Yeah. So these are also, you know, some of the voting cards that people were able to get. I apologize for the fact that the resolution is really bad on these, but just seeing these just makes you wonder how hard people had to actually work to get them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Another thing we have to talk about in terms of why what happened. I was just talking to you guys about the legal things that happened. There were also a lot of illegal things that happened. And the Klan was a huge part of that. If you tried to vote, you could almost guarantee that the Klan would pay you and your family a visit. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why that was able to happen. Well, why was the Klan able to run roughshod? Got to go back very quickly just a little bit. Remember, we're in the post-Civil War era, right? So this is 1876 or so. And after the Civil War, rather, right? You see what this picture is. This is from Harper's Weekly. And what it's depicting is you have these white people trying to attack these black folks, right? But you have a Union soldier in the middle basically saying, no, stop, right? So the role of the federal government and the Freedmen's Bureau and those agencies was to basically prevent white violence against African Americans and to try to make sure that these laws were actually upheld. But then we get the election of 1876. A lot of people don't know about this. I learned about this when I was in law school and I was floored. College. So you have the election of Samuel Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes, right? And in that election, it was very close. It's the only election in U.S. history where even the Electoral College couldn't solve it. And when that happens, it then goes to Congress. Congress to make a decision, right?
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you this. Okay, so like, if I had to look this up, and I was thinking it reminded me of Bush versus Gore. It
was exactly Bush. It was the 1800s version of Bush v. Gore,
right? But in Bush v. Gore, it was the Supreme Court that made the decision. So when did that? I mean, so explain that, Nareissa.
Yes, absolutely. If you were around during and old enough to understand Bush v. Gore, then this will resonate with you. So what happens is when the election goes to the House of Representatives and it says, well, what can we do here? They start polling folks and understanding that the next vote is going to be just as tight as the first vote. So then there's some backdoor dealing. And the Republicans, which remember at this time is still literally the party of Lincoln. Lincoln is still very much in folks' minds. And you have Hayes, who is the Republican. And the Democrats say, and the South is primarily Democrats at this time. They say, hey, you know what? We'll throw our votes to Hayes and make him president if and only if you all will get these troops out of the South and get all these folks out of here and just let us treat these black folks however we want. The Republicans said we get the White House. Okay, cool. So 1876 is a key year in Black history because literally from 1865, when the Civil War ended, to 1876, we had this like window of huge progress. Our literacy rate went from like 1 or 2% or whatever it was from the few people who could read to like 75%, like never been seen before in like human history. It was one of the first things we did. We founded churches. We started looking for our families. We did all of these things in that window of time. But when folks saw that we were going to be in a position to make decisions that affected them, they were like, pump your brakes, slow your roll. We got to make sure that we put things back the way that they should be. And what that means is having white folks in power. So that ended that experiment. So I just want to pause for a second because I saw a comment in the chat and I didn't know if you want to address that.
Ms. Butler says too many are using that same method today, selecting the right candidates to run. I think what she means, not understanding the primaries.
Absolutely.
What the primaries are. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's all other sorts of, we can probably talk about this later, all sorts of little subtle things that are still done today, and big things, as we know about, to dilute our voting power.
Yes.
But I did want to throw out this question. Just between 1876 and 1965, keep in mind, this is almost 100 years. How many Black people served in Congress? I want to see if anybody has a good guess.
I have a good guess, but I have a good guess because I had to look it up. Does anybody out there have a good guess? Or answer to this question? I was floored that it was so few, but then I remember it was we didn't get the Voting Rights Act till 1965. So what did I expect? Right?
Exactly. Anybody have any answers? I wanted to see if anybody had any answers. So you said you looked at what is the answer?
8.
Actually, it's a tiny bit higher. 10.
10. Okay.
Well, it might depend on which years you're counting too, but yeah, listen. That means that
somebody put 0.
Hey,
that's not quite that bad. But
if you're counting by tens and you round it, I guess you would still be at 10. But if you're counting by tens, 0, 10, you're still not that far on the number chart. It is. Think about that. For almost 100 years, 10 Black representatives in Congress. And that basically means that we've had like one per decade. It didn't quite shake out like that. But think about that. How ridiculous that is, that would happen. Oh, any from the South? I don't think so. Actually, I have to look it back up again. I really don't think so. Most of them, the most famous ones being Oscar DePriest from Chicago and Adam Clayton Powell from Harlem in New York. I think there may have been one from Louisiana. I have to look again, because one thing when I was looking up the count, I did not take note of where, but I want to say I saw one from Louisiana, but I could be wrong. So I don't like to say definitively yet, but I want to say of that one, maybe 2, but I could be wrong, because the South was going out of its way to make sure that that wouldn't happen. Because again, were white folks going to vote for a Black person, especially Southern whites? No, they weren't.
What we're clearly getting a very, very crystal clear picture of the Southern problem.
Absolutely. And the Southern problem has never been us.
No, it is not.
So this one is already spoiled.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask this question, which is, why is 1965 an important year for Black voting rights?
I'll let somebody in the audience answer that. And sometimes it takes a little bit when you're typing and then hitting the reply button for the answer to come up on the
yeah. So we'll give them a little bit of time.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody gonna answer this? Okay. I don't see anybody.
All right. So everyone knows, right, that in 1963, Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. Right. But what a lot of people don't know is that this was just one part of a strategy that the civil rights leaders had come up with. And a part of that strategy was voting rights, because as you may have heard Dr. King say, during the March on Washington, he was like, well, if a Negro in the South can't vote and a Negro in the North feels he has nothing to vote for, right? So they were still at the March on Washington focused on voting rights. So after this, the first thing that they worked on was the Civil Rights Act in 1964. That's crucial because that's the law that brought down the whites only signs and all of that. We definitely needed that. And if anyone says, oh, things were better under segregation, or please talk to someone who actually lived during segregation. It's one thing for us to choose to have our own dorms, fraternities, sororities, colleges. It's another thing for people to tell you that's your only option. So that's one thing. But as they were thinking about voting rights, other leaders emerged. This is one of my favorite Black history figures. This is Lou Hamer from Mississippi. She was crucial in leading the fight. She actually led a fight against the white Democrats in Mississippi and challenged them at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. And she was interviewed on television. She gave her famous quote where she said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired."
That's right.
She was over it. But she was someone, when she tried to register people to vote, they beat her so severely that it took her a month to recover. Think about that. For trying to register people to vote. That's how dangerous and how afraid they were of voting rights. They did not want us to vote. So that was her punishment for that. Her husband was attacked. He lost his job. A lot of the voting rights activists faced physical and economic violence. And it's important for us to know what they sacrificed along the way. And speaking of sacrifices, this is Jimmy Jackson.
What's his name?
Jimmy Jackson.
Okay.
And he was a voting rights activist. And he was actually killed and if you ever watch the movie Selma, you'll see his death depicted in the scene. That's a very great movie, has a great cast. Oprah Winfrey is in it. Chiwetel Ejiofor, Common, lots of different. No, that's David Oyelowo, who plays Dr. King in that movie. It's a great movie, but his death is depicted. And that gave them more of a push because in the aftermath of his death, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and a lot of the other organizations, they said, what we're going to do is we're going to march from Montgomery to Selma, right? That's where we're going to march. And we're going to march across this Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, the powers that were at the time in Alabama, the racist white governors, they did not want that. So you see them very calmly and very peacefully trying to cross the bridge. And you may have seen pictures of that bridge because there's a group of folks that recreate this every year now.
Yes.
But the man in the foreground, I'm going to ask this. Does anybody know who that is in the very front of this picture?
Yes, we do. I'll let the audience say who it is.
He's very young, much younger than you may remember seeing him.
Yeah. But very beloved.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Lori. Yes, that is a young John Lewis. And he was part of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And he was one of the few young folks to speak at the March on Washington. And so there he is. And you notice they're being peaceful. They're not doing anything. And a few moments after this picture is taken, this is what happens. So the state troopers, they come through, and that's John Lewis. And you see what they are doing to Mr. Lewis and to the other marchers. Again, just for marching, for wanting to say we deserve the right to vote. He was beaten severely against his head. He's very lucky that he lived and was able to not have any long-term consequences from that, because it definitely could have been. Yes, Amelia Boynton. Yes, she's in Selma as well. She was another big part of this. There's so many. I always enjoy talking about the women who were part of the movement as well, because they don't get as much attention. But yeah, so he's beaten. A lot of other people were killed. Reverend James Reeb, a white pastor, a Unitarian minister, was also killed. Viola Liuzzo, a white housewife and mother from Detroit, who just told her husband, she said, "That's wrong. I got to go down there and do something." She got ran off the road and killed, and who knows whatever else they did to kill her, because she had the nerve to give Black people rides in her car. And that's what she lost her life for. So I want to spell out to everybody, just to understand that we talk about the civil rights movement as being nonviolent, but that just means, I like to say, we weren't being violent. It does not mean that there was not violence directed towards us. There was a lot of violence directed towards us, and a lot of people fought and suffered for the right to vote. Any questions? I just want to pause for a second, check in, make sure we're in a good spot.
I wanted to tell you that Lori Washington is also your fellow Howard University School of Law graduate.
Well, hello. And HU, and my daughter always said, "You don't have to say it every time." I'm like, yes, I do. So I want to back up a little bit, because one thing that we have to consider is that even though we had the 15th Amendment, all of those restrictions that were put on the right to vote were still there. So that's what they were fighting for, because you would think already we have this thing enshrined in the Constitution, but it wasn't enough. So the activists, they wanted more. So this is President Lyndon Johnson, and I want us to talk about him just for a moment for two reasons. He was John F. Kennedy's vice president, and he, of course, after the tragic death of President Kennedy in Dallas in November 1963, he becomes president. And Black people honestly were afraid, because Johnson, he was from Texas, and when he was in the House of Representatives from Texas, he voted for segregationist policies. And what he said later, though, was when you are a representative, it's your job to vote for what the people in your district want. So you talk to them and you figure out what they want. But when you become the president, your job is to look out for everybody. So then your job is to do not what any one group of people wants, but to do what's right. So Johnson being president was huge, because he ran for president on his own in 1964 against Barry Goldwater. And Barry Goldwater, he didn't have this motto. This was George Wallace in Alabama. But you may have heard, especially if you are a fan of the movie or the musical Hairspray, or you may have just heard from studying history, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Barry Goldwater was very much a part of that flock, right? And by Johnson running in 1964, having passed the Civil Rights Act, Johnson thought he was going to just, take over and, get the white vote, but it didn't happen. But in his full term, Johnson then passed two more laws. In 1968, he passed the Fair Housing Act, which, again, we could do a whole nother show on that. But in 1965, he signed the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
And the Voting Rights Act is crucial. And this is the part that I'm highlighting here, is really what we refer to as Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and the pre-clearance requirement. So what happened was that if the Voting Rights Act said, for the pre-clearance, if you have a history of being a racist jurisdiction, you have to put all your voting maps and plans, send them to the Attorney General's office in Washington, D.C., and they have to approve them. Because if you have a history of racially biased voting, we don't trust you enough to come up with your own voting plans, right?
I was surprised at that. I did not realize that was really the breakdown of that. I didn't realize that was a very strong protection.
Yeah.
And that is what has disappeared, correct?
Yeah. That disappeared not the other day, though. We're going to talk about that. That actually disappeared a few cases ago. They've been chipping away at the Voting Rights Act of 1965 for some time. Some time that they have. And so this one, I want to say, no, it wasn't Shaw versus Reno. That's way too far. That was actually a positive case. I want to say Shelby County. Yeah, Shelby County versus Holder is the one that got rid of pre-clearance. Sorry, it takes a little time for the upload sometimes.
You're doing great. So I didn't understand this, and I'm liking that we're getting a breakdown of what it meant, because you keep hearing the numbers and the codes and stuff, but not the breaking it down for the lay people to understand what it is that we're talking about. There was one comment that said, speaking of Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Johnson, he knew our history and he made a great decision and spoke about our conditions.
Yes, he did. And Johnson is an interesting guy for a lot of reasons. He was not perfect, but he was really progressive in a lot of ways that we haven't seen since. He also started the war on poverty. So things like Medicaid, food stamps, all of that, like that all started in his administration.
Wow.
And were it not for the Vietnam War that he got mired in, I think we'd be living in a very different country right now. Well, that too, and also had Bobby Kennedy not been assassinated once Johnson decided he wasn't going to run for a second term. Those two things, I think, changed the trajectory. But quick aside, I got to do this because one of the reasons I always like to talk about Lyndon Johnson is because he made a prediction about our politics that I think it's so true. He said when he signed the Civil Rights Act, he said, I think we've lost the South for a generation, because what he thought was that white folks would not vote for a party that were behind African Americans and giving them rights. The only thing he was wrong about is that it wasn't generation. We're going on 2 generations now. But he had this quote, and I think this is something I like to talk about. And he really said this back in like 1965. He said, if you can convince the lowest, meanest, not mean like, but like stupid, dumb, the lowest, meanest white man that he is better than the best black man, you will always be able to control them. I'm paraphrasing it, but yeah, he called it, because how else do you explain how that guy who is currently in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue got there? That's literally racial grievance is the reason why he got to where he got.
That's right.
You know? So a lot of white folks believing that they were aggrieved, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So how did the Voting Rights Act affect Black representation? I'm not going to pause for this one because this one is more rhetorical, right? Let's take a look at this. Okay, this is from, I'm sorry, I have to scroll down a bit to get this, but if you take a look at the graph, right? The blue graph is the House and the orange graph is the Senate, right?
Okay.
The 41st Congress goes back to like 1880s, right? So look at this. So you see how at the 41st Congress, we kind of have the little bump there. And then look at how it's flatlining 60, 70. Look at that. But look at when the Voting Rights Act is introduced, that little dotted line there.
Yes.
Look at how that graph just shoots up. Like they call that a hockey stick graph. Like it goes like a hockey stick, right? It jumped way up. And we haven't had quite the numbers in the Senate, but still it's impressive to go from pretty much 0 to 5, right?
Yeah.
And at 61 African Americans in the current House of Representatives, that puts us at about 14-ish% of the House of Representatives, which is roughly, depending on who you ask and who counts it, our representation in the country, which seems good, right? It's not like we didn't never ask to be the only people with power. We never asked to be the only people to be president. We
Right.
never asked to be the only people on the Supreme Court. We just want to be fairly represented. And look what the Voting Rights Act has brought forth. Look, we have achieved, at least in the House of Representatives, something like that. We need 6, 7 more senators before we can say it in the Senate. But look, we're moving in the right direction. And that's important to know.
Right.
Because
Right.
remember I said we were going to come back to things? Remember what happened the last time historically we started moving in the right direction when it came to voting? Yeah, we're going to come back to that. But look at this. This is statewide representatives. And this one actually is specific to the South. And if you take a look at this, look how low it is, look, and then, the red graph is the 1800s, right? But look at the blue graph.
The blue graph is from 1960 to 1992.
Yeah, it doesn't go to, but you still get the idea.
Yeah.
And you can see how after 1965, again, it shoots up.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, once you get some rights and you act on them, yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And then we have to talk about one of my favorite people who one time when I asked my child, I was like, who was the first Black woman to run for Congress? And she said Shirley Temple. And I was like, you're so close. So close, but not quite. So Shirley Chisholm becomes the first African-American to run for president and actually get delegates and vote. And then building on that, we had Jesse Jackson in 1984 and 1988. Some of us might remember the Run, Jesse, Run, all of that. That was definitely how I got interested in politics as a child, because I was like, oh, Black people can run for president? Oh, okay, let's see how this turns out, right? And then, of course, the story culminates with, in 2008, less than 20 years after Jesse Jackson runs his second campaign, we get a Black president. And then right after that, we got a Black female vice president. We were headed in a good direction. And of course, you know what that means. And this is what brings us to that.
You got to wind it back. Always got to go backwards if you're going forwards.
Remember how I said history rhymes?
Yeah.
Well, when we got our voting rights in the 1870s and we started electing Black folks, white folks got really, really nervous, and they responded by a backlash to try to take away our rights. It's my theory, and I don't think I'm giving anything away here, because I think it's a lot of people's theory, that when this man got elected, a lot of folks just
went crazy.
Lack of a lost their minds. The idea that a Black man could be making decisions that impacted them, just threw them completely off balance.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Black people were still upset about racism, it's like, you got a Black president, where you still, well, that doesn't take care of everything. Doesn't take care of the wage gap, doesn't take care of the wealth gap, it doesn't take care of this, doesn't take care of our schools. Like, well, we voted for the Black guy, y'all still got stuff to say. I guess I also think a lot of people literally thought that if Obama got elected, that we would shut up. And because for some people, seeing him be there was just too much. I'm sure most of us remember the tan suit controversy.
Oh my God, that was so insane.
That's I love that story. So I want to have a picture in my office of him with the tan suit, because it's hilarious to me how ridiculous. For those of you who may not have heard, when Obama on Easter Sunday, I want to say it was 2013, 2014, he and his family they took pictures, and he had on this tan suit on the way to church. And people were like, oh, yeah, you look good, Mr. President. You look really good in that suit. So I think he was kind of feeling himself like people like the tan suit. So he busted out again during a press conference. And then
the White House briefing room.
Yeah, all of the Republicans and all of the Fox News pundits like, how dare he? He's disrespectful to the office. He's this, he's that. He couldn't do anything, that was right. Meanwhile, these same people support a man who is bankrupting our country, starting illegal wars, and who has so many files on him. We're not going to get into this because it's not about those files, but you all understand what I'm saying. So the rhyming here is the backlash. When white folks feel threatened that we are not just doing well, but in a position that we're doing better than them, or in a position where we might have authority over them. You don't even have to talk about politics. You've probably seen it in the workplace. There's a threat. And when they have the power to, then they'll lash out. So the backlash and the lash out was to say, nope, we don't want to have any more like him come around and come our way. We're going to try to make sure that we don't do that. So what happened the other day was this. In the Louisiana case, this is a Supreme Court. I'm going to come back to them in a second. As you can see, the Supreme Court, they decided that in this, the man in the middle, he's the Chief Justice, the one sitting between the two white gentlemen in the front row. He is John Roberts.
Right.
And John Roberts is the Chief Justice, and he was groomed by this group called the Federalist Society. They're conservative lawyers. They've been working on getting rid of the Voting Rights Act since before I was in law school. This has been like a 40, 50-year project. This has been a long time. Yes, and Project 2025 is a big part of what folks like the Heritage Foundation and the Federal Society, that's their stuff. This is what they want to see. So John Roberts, he might be a swing vote on some things, but as soon as I saw they were going to have a voting rights case, I was like, oh no, he's not going to resist the opportunity to complete his trifecta of things he wants to get rid of. When I was talking to people in 2016, I said, we have to protect the court because 3 things are going to happen if Trump comes into office. Thing number 1 is going to be that any Trump voted judges are going to get rid of affirmative action. That was the first thing that they did. They're going to get rid of abortion and reproductive rights, check. And the Voting Rights Act is going to go, and check. And I told people, I said, I don't know what order it's going to happen. It's going to depend on the cases and how they come. But yes, but if you look at the folks in this picture, it's only you see, I'm going to go in order. You see in the front, in sitting down at this is I'm trying to figure out where it is for you all, but
can you see my pointer?
I couldn't see it before. Let me see if I can see it now. I still can't see it.
Oh,
but
okay.
The Latina woman with the curly black hair.
Yeah, I have the pointer on her on Sotomayor.
Yes, that's Sonia Sotomayor. She was appointed by Barack Obama. The white man sitting next to her is Clarence Thomas, and he was appointed by George W. Bush at the age of 47. Then we have John Roberts, who we talked about. Then we have Samuel Alito, who is like John Roberts, part of that Federal Society. Then we have Elena Kagan, another.
Who put Alito in office in the Supreme Court?
That I want to say was Bush. I want to say, I could be wrong.
Old man Bush?
No, the junior.
Really?
Okay. And behind Elena Kagan, the African-American woman, the only African-American on the court at this time, is Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was appointed by President Biden. Then you have a man whose name I refuse to say because of the horrible things that he did to women and how they hid them. And he was appointed by Trump. And then you have next to him Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed by Trump, and that should have been Merrick Garland. That's another story if we have time to share.
Please. Oh, God.
And then Amy Coney Barrett, another Trump appointee. So you notice I just said Trump 3 times in a row.
Yep.
Nobody else has 3 appointees on this court. That should concern everyone.
Right.
I guarantee you that if the justices had been picked by Hillary Clinton, by Kamala Harris, by Joe Biden, they would not have voted the way that they did on the Voting Rights Act. A lot of people don't understand, and I like to say this a lot. The president I like to say, forgive me for being silly, but I hope this is something people will remember. When you grow up, you always think that the president is like the super powerful person, like the most powerful person in the world, right? Everybody says that they want to grow up to be the president. Nobody says, hey, I want to be Nancy Pelosi. I want to be the Speaker of the House. But if you study the Constitution, you would understand that under the Constitution, really, Nancy Pelosi is more powerful. I like to say that the president is like, if you watch the Super Friends when you were growing up, the president is like Aquaman, really powerful, but only in very specific circumstances. Like I'd be watching Super Friends as a kid and be like, why is Aquaman here? They're on land. He can't do anything, right? That is the situation. Congress is really powerful, but the president's huge powers are two. Number one, the president gets to decide with the consent of Congress, which they almost always give, who sits on the Supreme Court. And the other major power that the president has that we're seeing the effects of today is to commit troops to battle. And the president can do that without a declaration of war. And that's about to be a huge thing, especially if they don't get this war settled in a good amount of time. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the Supreme Court because a lot of people don't understand that the president is not all powerful. The president's not Superman. The president's a lot more like Aquaman. Congress is more like Superman. But the Supreme Court, you cannot discount them because, like Batman, they don't have a lot of superpowers, but they have a lot of force behind what they do because everyone has to bow down when they say that something is constitutional or unconstitutional. So you want to have the right people in these robes. But the only way to get the right people in the White House and in Congress. That has to be our mantra going forward. If we want things to change, we're going to have to change all three branches of government. We're going to have to change state government. And it's going to take time, but it is doable. And I wanted to end, this is the last slide, but I wanted to end with this. After saying all of this, I wanted to point out something that kind of made my heart sink not that long ago. This is from Georgia. This is voter turnout data from the very recent, just a couple of weeks ago, the primary elections that they had, the one where Keisha Lance Bottom, other folks were running. I wanted to point out, though, look at how many active voters Georgia has. And then look at how many voted in that primary.
They have over 7 million active voters, but the turnout was just barely over 2 million.
Yeah. And I picked Georgia because I looked for other states. Georgia's one of the few where you can get this broken down by race really clearly on. This is their official website, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. And look at the Black turnout, 8.6%. We got to do better. We have to do better.
I don't understand. And see, this is why I wanted to do this show, because I'm thinking, like I said, we don't talk about our Holocaust. And that, of course, is through the whole slave thing and all of that. But if you don't understand what the struggle was, how long it took for us to get there. Nareissa, how long was Jim Crow 1.0?
About 95 years, almost 100 years.
Almost 100 years we were in Jim Crow after slavery had ended.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks think that their money will save them, their connections will save them, their white friends, their white spouse, their white co-workers will save them. It's not. We are going to have to, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have any of those things or have relationships with white people, but I just think some of us have gotten into a mentality that we think that we are equally as American as anyone else because we interact with everybody and we can be friends with anybody. But we have to remember that the rules work differently for us. And we have, just like we tell our kids, if a police officer stops you, you put your hands up and you don't reach for anything. When it comes, we got to do the same thing when it comes for voting. We have to start putting that out there. But a lot of people don't vote as if their livelihood depends on it, even though it does.
It does.
You know, and oh, I lied because there's one more slide I forgot.
Right.
Remember how I said that the Civil War map would become relevant? This is a map from Cook Political Report about the states that either have or are considering redistricting.
Yes.
Look at the ones and where they are. Look at where the majority of the ones that are going to give Republicans more seats and take away Black voting rights. Look at where they are.
Florida, Texas.
Louisiana. And where do all those states have in common?
They're all in the South. They're all part of the Confederacy, the what we would say the old Confederacy, but it never really left.
No, it never did. And we have to remember that we have worked hard to get where we are. We stand on the shoulders of the people who fought to make sure that we could vote, that we could go about our lives without having to worry about if there was going to be a colored bathroom or a colored fountain. We could travel without having to have a green book to tell us if there's going to be a Black hotel that will stay with us, that will let us stay there, or a Black restaurant that will feed us. And a lot of us have taken that for granted. We have forgotten. So hopefully part of what we're doing today will help us remember that a lot of people worked for us to get where we are, but we also have to remember that it's our job, it's our generation to keep the fight going. We are not supposed to set ourselves back when it comes to rights. I think the 2016 election really hurt me, and for a long time I couldn't figure out why. And then I was thinking it's because it was the first time I could think of where a good number of us played a role in rolling our rights back. And the same thing with 2024, right? But I kind of expected it more to happen in 2024 because it had already happened. There's a good number of us that are willing to say, hey, I got what I need, so I don't care if other Black people have. We used to say, each one teach one, or,
Right.
help your brother up. A lot of us have gotten to the point where we used to help each other up the ladder. Now you want to climb the ladder, pull the ladder up and burn the ladder and scatter the ashes to make sure no one can follow you.
Right. And that's what essentially Clarence Thomas has done.
Yeah. And that's a huge issue, because if he really would make peace with his Blackness, we would be in a different position as well. He understand. You might not know this, but meaning the group, he was a Black Panther when he was young. His oldest son is named Jamal. He was married to a Black woman, but I think that he felt so angry that Black women, had treated him badly or weren't kind to him. So now he's taking his rage out on all of us. And yeah, he's an interesting character, but there are a lot more like him.
I've noticed on the internet streets. It's like we get 2 cents over rent, as Miss Butler said. We have arrived, and we believe that we are in the mix, and and our money will protect us. Some people do think that.
Yeah, and another issue, is that some of us who do have education and money or whatever think that we are quote unquote better than those of us who don't, sometimes referred to as the Pookies and the Ray Rays and whatever. Yeah. But when the police stop you, they're not asking you for your degree. They're not asking you for your credentials. No. And we as a community have to realize that these folks look at all of us the same. They don't care about your education. When they look at you, when they look at me, they don't see educated people with thoughts to share. They see threats. They feel fear, whether it's political fear or physical fear, right? One thing I can say, this happened to me when I think I got also a chance to learn early. When I was in high school once, I went up to a police officer's car because I had locked myself out of my house for probably, who knows, the 12th or 13th time that week. It was an everyday thing. So I walked to the 7-Eleven around the corner from my house, and a female police officer was parked there. And I was going to knock on her window to say, you know, do you have a quarter so I can use a payphone? Because that's how old I am. But she starts rolling her window up like she's afraid of me. Y'all can't tell because I'm sitting down, but I'm literally like this tall. I'm a little, in real life, I'm a little taller than a Barbie doll. So there was no reason for her to be afraid at all. You know, and especially at that point in time, I'm like 16, 17. What am I going to do? You know, I think if, you know, since given the grade I was in, maybe I had a protractor, you know, maybe I could have threw a calculator at her if I had gotten into my bag, but I posed no threat to her. But we have to be very aware of how that as a collective, we are viewed as less than. It's not fun to think about, but it's the reality. And because that's the reality, we have to act as that's the reality. And we have to vote for people who do not see us as less than, who see our potential, who value us. And that is what I hope that everybody will do.
Yeah. I know one thing, we've got to really be active, aggressively active in getting us to the polls, registered with IDs.
Yes.
I know here in Durham, we had a plan at some of our libraries where you could get free IDs for people who did not have them.
Yeah.
And I want to mention this out loud so that those who are listening and those who will listen to the replay of this show will be thinking about that. So as you are organizing in your communities to register people to vote, also look and see what you can do about IDs for people. We have to over show up. Literally, we have to over show up for this elections coming up.
We absolutely do. One of the reasons why we need to show up and show out, as they say, is because I don't think that the shenanigans are going to be anybody trying to steal the election. I think that pretty much everything they do is a dry run. And here in North Carolina, I know we have people from all over listening, but I want to talk about two things that happened in the last North Carolina statewide election. Back in 2024, after the presidential vote and all the other statewide races were called, we had a vote for Supreme Court justice here. And there was a woman named Allison Riggs, who is a white woman, but also by trade, she's a civil rights attorney. So Governor Roy Cooper, a Democrat, appointed her to fill this vacancy temporarily until the election could happen. And it came down to 700 votes is what it was. There's only 100 counties in North Carolina. So that's basically 7 people in every county made the difference. But that's not the issue, because the guy who ran against her, he had the nerve to challenge.
Unmitigated gall.
He had the nerve to challenge her win after it was certified by the North Carolina State Board of Elections, mind you, to say that it was fraudulent because everybody's name on their voter IDs didn't match their social security numbers, didn't match their social security name. There might have been typos. And he wanted almost 40,000 votes thrown out.
He did. Yeah, that was awful.
Now, the good news was that even the Republican judges, when it went to federal court, there was a Trump appointee who was like, I can't believe that you are trying to do this. And even the state Supreme Court, which has a majority of Republicans, they said, well, we'll give you 2 weeks. And if you can go through this list of people and show us how many of them may have voted fraudulently, maybe we'll consider hearing it. And that just That's the kind of shenanigans I think that they will pull if they get a chance, but they can't do that if they're not in recount territory. They can't do that if the margins aren't close. If you lose by 100,000, 200,000 votes, you just got to take that L. And that's how we need to be thinking. That is one way to protect ourselves from the kind of shenanigans that they like to pull.
Right. Well, Nareissa, we don't have any more slides. Or anybody else in the I really want all of you all to please share this video. Share the video. Share. Because we really have to get people talking about stuff. And if you know the past, maybe you can do better for the present. I'm serious. Whatever tactics that we have to get people motivated and wanting to do something, this is my little contribution to society. And I just want us to get on board, because what we're seeing is frightening. And just to think about what our people went through, my God, almost 100 years of Jim Crow, really?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they want to turn things back to? We're not going back. We cannot go back.
Yeah.
We absolutely cannot go back. And so the only way to move forward is that we've just got to we have to do things better. We have to do things better. Thank you, Lori, for participating. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. So we are going to call it a night.
Yes.
Some people came on and they said, because we normally start at 8:00 and we started at 7 because you needed to start. You wanted to start early, so I obliged you to change the time of the show. But everybody, please share the message and get people registered to vote, guys. It's up to all of us. Yeah, up to all of us. All right. Well, good night, Professor Nareissa Smith, Esquire.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it so much.
All right. Thank you. Well, I thought I played the outro.
It did, but I think we're